Thank you so much for being with us. And of course, we are here once more with another beautiful, amazing show for you. You know this beautiful lady as a Caribbean Hall of Fame inductee, a recipient of the Gospel Icon Award and the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from President Biden himself and Vice President Harris. After being critically ill for many years, she was revived from the brink of death. Today, you know her as the owner for Hold My Hands. It's not over now. Survivor, one of my favorite, and yes, I'm sure you have yours too. She is no other than beautiful, graceful, vibrant Dr. Glacia Robinson. We welcome you, Dr. Robinson. How are you doing today? Welcome to the Lady
Oh,
Talk Show.
thank you so much for having me. I am doing well, and it's wonderful to meet you, Lady Tracey. Thank you for your labor of love. Thank you for your patience and your great spirit. Thank you for opening your platform to us. Our pleasure to be of service, and I'm so delighted that day and now we finally get to connect and talk. And talk about the goodness of the Lord. Thank you so much for having me.
I am honored as well, woman of God, and I just love your grace. I don't know why they did not call you Grace Robbins,
Oh.
but
Uh,
each time I speak with you, I am just awed by your grace and the peace that God has blessed you with. And for those who don't know, because I am all the way here in Europe, I know our Jamaican knows, but yes, tell us, who is Glacia Robinson?
Lacey Robinson is a vessel, a servant of the Lord, a little girl at heart. I love the simple things in life. I love God. I love to worship Him. I love to tell Him and show Him how much He means to me in my daily walk. Therefore, worshiping God is a lifestyle for me. I love being of service to God and to others. And as a result, I have lived a life of service by God's grace. And I am always delighted about every opportunity that I get to share the goodness of the Lord and to encourage others. So I love to encourage. I love to pray. I love to pray. I love vegetables. I love my greens. I love my wheatgrass and moringa. And yeah, I love and garlic.
No, that's a true
And
That's a true
of course,
Jamaican.
and ginger.
Well, we like
Yes,
to eat what we grow. And
yeah,
I am just
absolutely.
thankful that we got the opportunity to hear for ourselves a little bit more than what publicists say, what the gleaners say, what TV
True.
say, because sometimes it's there and it's elaborating. But when we come to the testament of who you are, I believe that is even more honorable. So thank you so much. Now, I know that you had your personal experience with Christ, and one of which was on your road when you met critically ill, and that led you closer to God. But can you
Absolutely.
tell us that very moment, Dr. Robinson, that you said to yourself, Jesus is my only way and I am not turning back? What was your experience like when you met Christ?
Oh, wow. I've had so many encounters with God, but I can remember as I started singing when I was 4 years old. I grew up in Newport, Manchester, Jamaica. And I grew up in a very God-fearing family with my grandmother, my mom, my extended family, aunts and uncles. My father I've never met. My mother told me that when she got pregnant with me, he said he didn't want to have anything to do with me. As a result, I've never met him. But mommy has worked hard, and my family, my grandmother, they supported us through the years, and I'm so thankful. But one thing that really stood out, or one of the many things that stood out to me, is mommy's faith and my grandmother's faith, the way they loved the Lord, the way they worshiped God. And, we always had to be at church. Me did love that. My sister never really so loved that all the time because, church services were long and a lot of fasting and prayer. But somehow I was just drawn to that. So, when I was 4 years old, I had my first encounter with God. I remember we had harvest at church and I had nothing to bring. And as I sat on the veranda steps in Newport, nice cool breeze and the trees and everything, just beautiful. And I was talking to the Lord and I said, God, me not have nothing for carry go harvest. And I heard the voice of God, but at the time I didn't know it was the voice of God, of course. I'm 4 years old. So the voice said, borrow your grandmother's basket. Now, this is the basket that my grandmother, Mama, would take to the market on Saturdays. So I didn't hesitate. I went to her and I said, Mama, me can borrow your basket, please? She said, sure, my child, go ahead. No, I didn't know what I was going to do with the basket, but I took the basket, went back to the steps, and I found myself decorating the basket. So I get all the little papers and pretty, pretty paper, decorate the basket. Sunday evening now, it's time to go to harvest. Got dressed in my white dress, and I brought the empty basket with me. When I got to the compound of the church in Newport, my pastor then was Bishop Robinson, and we would bring the first fruits. So all the children, they had their oranges, bananas, everything, first fruits, but my basket was empty. Sheepishly, I stood at the back of the line, and as we were singing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, we shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. I was walking behind the children singing, but with my empty basket. The children were ahead of me. They laid their fruits on the altar, everything, and then they turned around, went back to their seats. I found myself going up further to where the pastor would preach from, not at the front of the altar, but to the pulpit. And I went up top tier, laid the empty basket on the floor, and I stood in the basket. And I heard myself saying, I give myself to harvest. I gave myself harvest of God, to the service of God. Wow. And Lady Tracey, the entire tenor of the service changed. People started worshiping, and Pastor Robinson, they laid hands on me and they prayed and spoke over my life. And since that time, my life was never the same. I was always hungry for God. When I'm walking and playing, and I was always talking to God. So growing up in a household of faith, my grandmother, she was the first humanitarian to me. And that's as a result, I'm a humanitarian. I thank God for that. She would always cook and share her meals. And when my auntie from Canada would send goods from, in a barrel, my grandmother would cut the soap in half, cut the toothpaste in half. And at the end of the service, she would stand outside quietly and she's handing out things to everybody like, here, bless this, give this to this, give that. So they mirrored faith, active faith, and a relationship with God. And as I stood at my mother's knees and I watched her worship and she was crying out to God, I said, I want to love God like how mommy loved God. I want to love God like how my grandmother loved God. And as a result, I've always wanted the things of God and wanted to know God for myself. Years passed, and my Pastor Robinson was preaching. By this time, I was 9 years old, and he was talking about repentance, the importance of repentance. And I was so convicted in my spirit. I was 9 years old, and I said, I just knew that I needed to give my life to the Lord. I went up to the altar, and then I knew I needed to get baptized. Now, at this time, children at my age didn't get baptized, but I went to the pastor and I told him that I'd like to get baptized. I talked to my grandmother and my mother, and they said, of course, if this is what you feel in your spirit, if this is what you think God is saying to you, go ahead. And they blessed me and I got baptized. I was the first child to get baptized in the Newport New Testament Church.
Wow.
Now, growing up, so that's when I got saved and I started walking with the Lord. Of course, I remember after I got baptized, it's a very funny story. I'm in class and Sunday passed. I got baptized a Sunday evening and we got to Betharbara All Age School. So teacher would ask, any news, like if there's anything from the news that we'd like to share in the class. This girl with her big mouth shout out, yes, Miss Glacia, yesterday, the whole class started laughing and they started to call me Grease Can. And I said, give me 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever. But I just kept praying in my heart. I said, I give my life to the Lord. Thy vows are upon me, oh God, until death.
Amen.
And by God's grace, I continued my journey of faith.
And I think the Lord was just preparing you in such a way that when the Bible speaks about when the evil days come, You says
Yes.
you will not have no more interest, no more desire in God. I think God was preparing you for the evil days, woman of God. And it's because you remember your creator in the days of your youth that kept you. But I'm excited to hear more because this is such a touching testimony. I am all for the kids. And when a little child can put herself in the basket and say, God, I am
Here
the
I am. My answer is yes. Use me. I surrender. And then my mom told me years later that when I was actually in her womb, she laid her hand on her stomach and she said, God, this child is yours. So when I evolved to 4 years old and did that publicly, it was actually a confirmation of what happened while I was in the.
And it was a personal decision. No one forced
Yes.
you. That was
Nobody forced me.
hard. Even though you were like Samuel, you did not know who was speaking to you, but you just walked with your little basket, even though it felt foolish.
Yes.
And you went
Yes. And they laughed at me. They laughed at me. But
hard.
to this day, yeah.
It is really a special thing to have a relationship with God. And I want to get to the illness because I know that this has been a powerful testimony worldwide. We heard your song.
Yes.
You wrote a specific track on your experience when you went through the rough. But I know some who don't know your story. I remember for me, I was going through it, and one song
Wow.
kept in my spirit in 2013 when I got saved was Hold My Hands. And I
Wow.
remember Hold My Hands was just there because of the issue I was going through at the time. And that was mental illness. And I kept saying, God, hold my hands. Only did I know that the songwriter would be talking with me in the future.
Here I am. Here I am. Here I
After you
am.
hold it. So, I mean, I want to hear your testimony, woman of God, because nothing came easily for sure. And all those beautiful inspirations that you did, it came with a lot of pressure. So we want to hear what was that moment like, that journey that you overcame chronic illness and how it shapes your perspective on life and your music today. Tell us.
I thank God for the preservation of my life as well as the preservation of my destiny. I always say, if you're still breathing, then God is not finished. Because his deliberate deposit of life into us, emblematic of his plan for our lives, his purpose for our lives, and how much he loves us. I look back in my life and I remember as I was on the verge of finishing high school, still sweetly saved and singing for the Lord and going to different places and singing, I was planning to go into full-time medicine. And I prayed, I said, God, if it is not your will for me, still close it down and show me what you want. And at 17 years old, the Lord appeared to me in a vision. And he said to me, I have chosen you to go into all the world. You'll not only sing, but you'll preach my word. I heard the voice of my Father. When I heard it, I said, God, I will sing. Because at that time, I was painfully shy. So I said, God, I will sing, but I don't want to talk to people. I really don't want to talk to people. I will sing anything you want me to sing, but I don't want to talk to nobody. All right? That's what I said to him. And he said, open your mouth and I will fill it with words. After that, I said to him, God, but if I go into ministry, I won't be able to take care of my mother because my mother has worked sometimes 2 jobs, just trying to make ends meet, providing for the entire family. So I said, God, if I go into ministry, I won't be able to take care of my mother. He said in response, I will supply all of your needs according to my riches in glory. Eventually I said, okay, Lord, my answer to you is yes. I woke up from that encounter and I thought I did what I thought I needed to do, which was I applied to the Bethel Bible College. I got accepted. But just before admission, went in for orientation and everything, I had another encounter. And I saw this person that looked like an angel, but was also a messenger. He shook my hand 3 times and he said, go to youth with a mission. Go to youth with a mission. I said, okay. When I heard that, I'm like, oh my God. That means that if me got on missionary now, and now me not get no money, because nothing not go on for me. So I said to myself, because I remember when the missionaries would come into the community from overseas and they'd volunteer their time, nobody paid them. So that's my perception of a missionary. And I'm like, oh, but I said, okay, Lord, my answer is still yes. I went to my grandmother and my mom. I shared the encounter with them. And blessed me. I went to be trained as a missionary, finished missionary school. And from there, I started serving as a missionary quietly in the background, because that's my forte, back, round about. And, traveled to many countries, bringing medical supplies, ministering in the prisons, in the hospital, me and my guitar on the bus. Sometimes me not have no fear if I go back home, but me just determined to serve the Lord. People looked at me then and they said, "Go on this guitar. Where you going?" People said, and when they heard me sing, they're like, "Oh, if I had a voice like you, I'd be doing blah, blah, blah." Some people said I didn't have any ambition and I would never amount to anything. But I continued to hold on to the word. And I said, "God, I know that you've called me. I did not choose music or ministry. So for me, music is not a career, it's a calling." Called me. So I'm journeying ahead of time now, started serving as a missionary. And then I just got back from ministering in New Zealand. I went for training and I was ministering there, and it was a very challenging trip. I'll share more about that. But as I got back to Jamaica, my mom, who was always encouraging me to enter the festival, gospel festival, JCDC gospel song competition, she was always saying I should do it. But because I don't like the crowd and the limelight, I said no. But she prayed with me and she said, go for it. So I eventually applied, and my sister went with me for the audition. Now I've been singing since 4 years old, so I know a thing or two about engaging an audience and making sure that my diction and enunciation is clear and my message, and I engage with eye contact and smiling. You see, I didn't want to do it, so I didn't want to enter the competition, so I did it just like grudgingly. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna get them off my back. So when I went up there with my guitar and my entry song, Hold My Hand Today, I'm just like looking all over the place and no conviction, no passion. When we finished, my sister said, "My God, Mrs., you couldn't try. You couldn't." I said, "You're lucky. I really want in this thing. I just want to go back to serving in the background as a missionary." But when I started to sing there, like, even though I tried to sing as bad as possible, but the judges, they were excited and they're like, "Oh my God, we don't even know how to judge you." And I'm like, okay. And still I'm like, all right, nice. Okay, bye. Thank you. Bye. I did it. But during that time, though, after I recorded the song with John Williams, the song started taking on a life of its own. Then the Lord appeared to me in another dream and a vision, and he showed me the song. People were singing the song all around the world, holding their hands up to the Lord and crying and praying, and people were getting healed and delivered from this. So I said, okay, Lord, I surrender. Entered the competition, then I won the competition by God's grace. And from that time, I got sick. This was at the height of my ministry, where #1 records and millions of dollars, sold out concerts around the world. But just before I got sick, I remember praying and I was talking to the Lord. I was actually booked to minister overseas, and I started praying and saying to God, Father, I just want to thank you for all this success that you've given to me, all these blessings, these awards, everything.